I'm totally stealing this idea from Moon Kitty and Mutely, but you know what? I don't give a diddly dang heck about that. Because this is gonna be crazy. So let's start with the easy bit. Professor Rat Guy and his girlfriend Carolyn make a time machine with the help of Mr. Fartface, Henry Notstein, and Dave Portapotty. The time machine explodes and Carolyn dies. Professor Rat Guy, who is not yet a professor, cries and tries to help people and ends up adopting 2 kids who are in that disaster to cope. This is a perfectly normal coping mechanism. So there's these kids, Gramophone and Noodle. Sorry, I mean Grant and Nigel. They get kidnapped by Mr. Fartface. They then go and make an entire godforsaken underground city because they're mad at their adopted dad who had them for literally a month because he just can't find them, and they got kidnapped by his old friend who's kind of a prick. Maybe we aren't doing the right thing, says Grant. Maybe you're being stupid, says Nigel and Mr. Fartface. Okay, says Grant, who completely accepts this because life sucks and making an underground city to trick your ex-adoptive father into thinking he's gone to the future and become an absolutely horrible person who ruined everything he loves is a normal way to be mad. So Mr. Rat Dad and his new son Marcel go to this time machine showcase thing. Oh, and Rick's there too. Rick and Marcel are gay. Kiss kiss fall in love. Except not, because Rick is a disaster and Marcel is an idiot who doesn't get that Rick is gay. Until Grant says you're both gay and Rick goes okay and kisses a guy he likes. Also, the whole time, someone who looks a lot like Rat Guy's dead fiancée, Carolyn, shows up and Rat Guy keeps making himself look stupid by running after her just a flashback monologue. Rick and Marcel trying to get him to spill, but he doesn't because he is sad. Noodle and Grant pretend to be older versions of Marcel and Marcel's brothers who are not appearing in the story. They basically tell everyone what's happening in this future and that time travel warped Rat Dad's mad mind into, hey look, I can save Carolyn if I do this thing, and everyone else is like, no, don't do the thing, and he was all, you can't stop me, I'm gonna get her back. So they do a lot of stuff about trying to figure things out, and none of it really matters except the slot machine gun, and they're just doing things until they finally go see future Rat Dad himself. He is very mean. Wait, says the real Marcel, you can't be Rat Dad, you're mean. Oh no, my papa's found out, says Mr. Fartface, but I'm gonna trap you in this cage so you can't tell anyone. Well, says Professor Rat Dad, I'm not actually Rat Dad either. Then he pulls off his face, revealing that during this entire scene, Rat Dad was actually Dave Portapotty, who is now an epic makeup guy who really should get into the movie industry instead of pretending to be people he is not. But he's too vengeful to do that, mostly vengeful against Rat Dad, so no one can tell why he's helping. If you're not Rat Dad, then who is? Asks definitely future Sir not appearing in this story, who is actually Nigel. I am, says a random guy who removes his helmet. It is actually Rat Dad, and he fights for his kids, who he has not yet adopted. Mr. Fartface escapes, because of course he does. And everyone's like, oh heck, maybe we should run before Fartface's mafia kind of kills us very dead or whatever. So Grant is like, okay, I know a place, and brings him to a cafe. But wait, says Rick, if that wasn't future Rat Dad, then is this even the real future? Frick, says Nigel. If it's not the real future, then who are you two really? Marcel asks. Frick, says Grant. We're actually evil, says Nigel, who runs off, leaving his brother because he's a coward. Grant is sad. Alexa, play How Could This Happen to Me? He gets over it because he knows his brother is just an idiot, even though he does love him. Grant joins the club, as does definitely not Carolyn, who looks miraculously identical to the girl who totally 100% died in that explosion. Rat Dad doesn't question this at all. Nigel goes and uses the giant frick you mecha and nearly destroys things, but with that power of love, Rat Dad and Grant save him, and hug, and cry a lot. You're under arrest, says the police to Nigel, Grant, and Mr. Fartface, who are somehow all alive because reasons. No, says Rat Dad, I'm going to take care of these kids and it's okay. The police completely accept this. Okay, but this guy is going to prison, the police say, and they take Mr. Fartface to jail. Everyone is happy until definitely not Carolyn and Mr. Rat Dad talk for a little bit. Psych, I'm Carolyn, she says. Oh my god, but there was an explosion, he says. Yeah, but time travel works, she says. I love you, he says. I love you too, but I'm gonna die soon, she says. Wait, what? He says. I'm not stable and I'm gonna go back to my time of dying, she says. No, Rat Dad says. Sorry, but I gotta go, love you, she says. They kiss, and then she walks off and poofs back to 10 years ago when she died. This is so sad. Alexa and then Marcel and his bro moved to England. The end. Except that's just the freaking backstory for the whole story. So 5 years after this, when Nigel and Grant are totally reacclimated to normal life, Nigel hears about his actual birth family. So like, your sisters didn't die in that fire, says someone who tells him this. Yo, I'm gonna go meet them again, he says happily. And then they don't believe that he's their real brother, and they kick him out, so he goes to a bar and cries. That night, someone kills his sisters, and he's found passed out in an alley covered in alcohol and holding a pocket knife with their blood on it. Super open and closed case. No one even blinks an eye at it. Except then, his adoptive family are all like, no, and they go look closer at him in the hospital to see if anything's weird. And something is very weird, but they don't know because plot requires it. Some guy keeps coming and going and talking to him, saying that he's a coworker of his, but, Nigel's a bum, he doesn't have a job. Nigel goes back to jail once he's awake, and psych, he now has DID and 2 personalities. Let's call them Meme Lord and Prick, or Heelys and Prof, because those are their actual names and stuff, even though they're super dumb names. Heelys is basically Nigel and an absolute softie, a sad little boy who needs a hug and lots of dumb soda. And then there's Prof, who is an absolute monster. Well, not really, he's just scared of others and protects himself and Heelys by threatening/attacking others. And then a new guy, Stefan, comes in. Hey, maybe you're not a mean guy, he says. Lol, you're cute, says Heelys. Oh no, he's hot, says Prof, internally, because that's how this works. Well, do you want to be a police officer? Says Stefan. Okay, says Heelys. Oh no, says Prof, who was ignored. They then become a police officer. So then Heelys and Prof totally push away their family. Hey wait, says Grant, that's illegal. I don't care, I don't want to hurt you, says Heelys, who shoves him away harder. 5 years later, they still have no idea about any of anything. They're just sitting there on the case like, this is still very open and shut. No help at all on that front, even though Professor Ratdad and Grant are still trying to save Nigel and being totally ignored. Prof has a hit list and a list of people he's already heard a million times by trying to push them away from him. And then another person comes in to join the room of disaster zones. Hi, she says, this is Jokel. Her name is a joke off of Jekyll because she is not the Jekyll and Hyde here. Actually, it's a joke off of that one guy in Delta Room, but don't ask. Oh no, that's a child, says Heelys. For once I agree, says Prof. Well, heck, we can't hurt her, they agree. She does not hear any of this. The first time she sees Prof, she is very confused. Who isn't, though? He's a bit dangerous, but mostly pretty chill. She and Heelys get along very well, and she manages to get closer to Prof as well, eventually finding out that everyone thinks he murdered someone, and Heelys agrees, while Prof literally doesn't remember any of it. She asks some of these other people, like Jensen, who shrugs, and Ori, who is an idiot lesbian who loves Jokel. Neither of them have information for her. And then she asks Professor Ratdad and Grant about this, and the 3 of them try to work together on the case in the background. And then Heelys gets kidnapped again by some girl who is bitter, and probably my self-insert. She threatens to kill Stefan, who is not his boyfriend, so Heelys is like, lol, guess this is my life now, and goes with her. She then tells the others not to trust Nigel Parkersburg before someone shoots her, and she dies. When Stefan and Jokel find her body about 30 seconds later, they also find Nigel calmly sitting there with a gun in his lap, tied to a chair, chilling out, and probably humming All-Star. Hi, he says. Oh my gosh, did you kill her? Says Stefan. No, do you really think I could? I'm not holding a gun, says Nigel. Yes, you are, says Stefan. Well, I can't tell, I'm blindfolded, says Nigel. Frick, says Jokel. Hey guys, I heard a gunshot, says Jensen, who just arrived. Oh dang, she's dead. Any idea who could have done it? And then Jokel says, I think it had to be Nigel, because it was only them in the room and there's only one way out and we're in the way. Oh no, says everyone. So Nigel gets himself arrested again. Wait, says Jokel. What, says everyone. Someone else could have done it, says Jokel. Wait, what, says everyone. There's no freaking cartridge, she says. Oh my god, maybe he's innocent, says Stefan. So the 2 of them go out yet again to prove that sure, Nigel is an idiot and a prick sometimes, but he'd never kill the author's self-insert. So they look around the place and find a super not obvious secret passageway and footprints leading out and back into the house. So neither of them knew it existed, and only one person went into the house after it was raining. They know it was Jensen. So Jokel goes and yells at him, and he tells her that he was blackmailed into framing Nigel twice by someone. So Jokel goes to see Grant's boyfriend, not Virgil, who is a tech guy. Hey, can you help me track this? She says. That's probably illegal, Virgil says. It's to figure out who's trying to frame Nigel for murder, Jokel says. Okay, says Virgil, and he traces the message to a specific place. Dramatic gasp. The person who's trying to ruin Nigel's life is Mr. Fartface. Everyone is surprised, but it's also not that shocking because he's always been very manipulative. So he's put into higher security, and Nigel is released from both of his convictions of murder, leaving him free to do whatever he wants. So he goes home and visits his adopted family. There are more tears and more hugs. They adopt him as the DID mess that he is, and he cries over that. Then he and Jokel go and start their own detective agency, and he adopts some rats for Ratdad to stay at their agency for whenever they're nervous. Things end happily, even though it's all a super roundabout way to get there. Oh, and Rick and Marcel got married. That's important, even though it never showed up in the story. Ratdad cried first. In the end, everyone lives happily ever after except for Mr. Fartface and Henry Notstein, who is completely forgotten but also went to jail, and Carolyn, who is dead. But wait, they managed to figure out how to get her back through time travel, and she's able to stay in their time with Rat Dad. Everyone but Fartface and Henry Notstein live happily ever after. The end.